Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Fish-Sight and World Wildlife Fund webinar, which is going to be on the Seafood Task Force. The webinar comes in the wake of an excellent article by the Fish-Sight's new columnist, Aaron McNevin, who many of you will know because he is the WWF's Vice President of Aquaculture. And he wrote a fantastic article for us on the Seafood Task Force, which some of you will have read, I hope, called Setting a New Standard in the Thai Shrimp Sector. And this webinar is really a follow-up on the article and a chance for you to find out a little bit more about the task force. It's going to be, we're looking for it to be as interactive as possible. So please do send in questions throughout the event, and at the end we'll have a Q&A, or you'll have a chance to put your questions to our excellent lineup of panelists. So just a quick introduction to the event itself. The Seafood Task Force has been going for 6 years, and it was launched to tackle some of the most shocking practices in the aquaculture supply chain, including issues such as forced and bonded labor that were one stage commonplace in Thailand's reduction fishery fleet. How the Seafood Task Force works, it brought together a coalition of players from across the supply chain, and they entered into pre-competitive collaboration, which is very impressive, from fisheries companies to shrimp feed companies to processors and retailers. And it's really tackling both environmental and human rights issues. The task force is at a very pivotal moment because it's looking to expand into other countries, including Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. So in order to, before it does so, we're going to speak to some of the key players within the task force about what they've achieved so far and what they would like to, how they'd like to see it develop over the course of the next decade and beyond. I'm now just going to hand over, give everyone a chance to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Aaron McNevin.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Aaron McNevin. As you noted, I'm the VP for Aquaculture and also coordinate the network, WWF's network on aquaculture. I've been with WWF since about 2005, and I joined the task force, I guess, in the very early stages, and I am with my colleague Lydia. I'm a co-chair of an external stakeholder advisory group for the Seafood Task Force.
Thank you, Aaron. And next we have Nan, Ruchi Wong.
Hi, my name is Nantawan. Last name is Ruchi Wong, or you can call me Nan. I work with a Thai Royal Frozen Food. We are a frozen seafood processor in Thailand. We export mainly to the US, Canada, Japan, China, and some other countries in Asia. I've got involved with the task force since day 2, day 3, so from the very beginning. And so that's it for now. Right.
Thank you, Dan. And Alyssa, you're up next.
Hi, my name is Alyssa, and I work with Marine Gold Products. I look after the sustainability of the supply chain and also the certification system, including the food safety, social and environmental aspects. And Marine Gold has been very active in the Seafood Task Force because our managing director, the owner, is also on the board of the Seafood Task Force. And we have been in the shrimp business for more than 20 years. So we know quite a bit about it. Yeah, so that's for me.
Thank you, Alyssa. And next up we have Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Youngman. I work for Albert Heijn. We're the biggest food retailer in the Netherlands, and we're part of Ahold Delhaize Group, which is one of the biggest retail groups in the world. I I'm responsible for sustainability at Albert Heijn. So also responsible for our seafood work and our human rights work, and our transparency and traceability work. In my previous function, which was at Aal Delhaize, I was also part of the board of the Seafood Taskforce. So, and now in my current function, I'm actually trying to implement on an operational scale some of the work that we're trying to achieve in our supply chains. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And finally, Lydia Long.
Thank you. I'm like Aaron, I've been with the Seafood Task Force since, not quite since the beginning, but for 4 or 5 years now, working on various working groups, currently co-chairing with Aaron, the external stakeholder advisory group, and working in what we call subgroup 6, which is focusing on capability building and impact measures. And I've been at Verite, an NGO, I don't know if you've heard of us, but for over 20 years. I'm currently leading global training and capability building and serving as the fish lead in the organization.
Thank you, Lydia. And we also had a cameo from Aaron's body double there, Laurent Vigney. I'm not quite sure why he was there, but he's gone now. But thank you anyway for coming, Laurent. I'm sure you'll be adding some positive thoughts from the side. Anyway, okay. So just getting onto the meat of the webinar, we're going to get into what everyone's bringing to the equation and what everyone's taking out from it. And yeah, we're going to start with you, Aaron, because you've been in it since the beginning. I mean, a lot of you have been in it since the beginning. And I'd really want to know, not only why did you get involved? I think you wrote about that very nicely in your article, but just as a quick recap, and what has it changed? What's it achieved in the last 6 years?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's, maybe it's worthwhile to say, like, to talk a little bit about pre-Seafood Task Force, and I basically cut my teeth with WWF a long time ago working on standards for aquaculture, and those standards eventually were transferred to a certification program. And when you involve a lot of stakeholders in those things, the standards lists end up getting pretty long, and then you're starting to compare say habitat destruction with numbers on buildings, and you start to get the sense that maybe we're not focusing on the key issues here. And then it reminded me this morning, because I was in Suratani when I was asked to review a seafood benchmarking criteria list, and after a week of doing that, I started to think we're over designing a utopia for aquaculture and for seafood. And then like a ton of bricks, the news came out from The Guardian, and then the AP stories. And at that time, Can
you just remind us what the news from The Guardian was for those who...
Sure. The news from The Guardian was the allegations of forced labor in the farm shrimp supply chain in Thailand. And those allegations were centered around fishing vessels that provided basically the bycatch or leftover fish for fish meal that was then incorporated into shrimp feeds and sold, and farmers using those. And that was the main source of the issues. And so,
can I just ask quickly, was that a surprise to you? Was that a surprise to people generally who are on the fringes of the industry?
I think that, again, I just feel like we painted the picture ourselves. I mean, in a lot of ways, Westerners painted the picture themselves about what they wanted to see and what things should be. And in doing so, I think we lost sight of engaging and looking and listening on the ground for the issues. And so I think it did take a lot of people off guard. But I think it's also a pretty stark reminder that, you know, what happens when we deplete these natural resources to the point where they're having trouble recovering and expanding. So yeah, I believe it did. And it certainly took the certifications by surprise too. I mean, they were certifying feed mills down there that were, you know, actively sourcing this stuff. So it was real difficult. But, you know, the real work of understanding the supply chain, understanding the magnitude, the number of actors, this is something that I think most people don't do, or at least from the NGO world, we don't do. We look for processes to support our assumptions, and I think that those assumptions were really tested in Thailand. And I think that there was no master plan for the Seafood Task Force, you know, when it started, and it grew because there was, you know, there was demand and there was also a will, and that grew in support. And so what I see about the Seafood Task Force is a very new model of supply chain oversight. This is something that, I mean, when you look at the face of Thailand with, you know, maybe 7,000 farmers and 250 farmers certified, you know, these systems are not reaching scale. And to reach scale would be impossible from just from a operational cost perspective. You know, the certifications can't do everything. So what really interested me is that there was a real concerted effort to want to know what's happening and actually to change things. And then when you see folks like Alyssa and Nan and the other manufacturers, like, you know, competitors, but really sitting down at the table and coming up with solutions. I mean, this isn't a show, you know, and they'll talk about it. These are real changes, systemic changes that have taken place on a national level. So I think that when you see something that's so tangible and so real, and something that can really change things, you really want to get in there and support, you know. I think that one of the big problems in the early stages was people thought that this was kind of the same old sustainability initiative where a bunch of people join and talk and then the problem solved because of that. And a lot of people, including a lot of NGOs, you know, tried to establish their own, you know, pet project about the task force. And I think that that's some of the growing pains of the task force, shaking loose a lot of that baggage to really maintain. And, you know, this stuff doesn't turn around in 18 months. So that does take a long time, but that's just all the more of the evidence why I really support it, because these folks are stuck in it and they're making lasting change.
And how long did it take before it started to make a difference?
I think once people realized that this wasn't going to be something that was just a checkbox, when people realized that folks weren't going away, and the solution needed to be demonstrated rather than talked about or written about. So I would say early on, but, you know, the group was building this, you know, while we were driving. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is this is a membership. This is a supply chain owner membership. This isn't kind of an NGO talking shop or things like that. This is about the private sector taking back control kind of their future and destiny by making these changes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aaron. Well, it's obviously quite it's a personal project for you as well as a professional one by the sound of things.
Yep. Definitely.
Good. Now, good now to get a perspective of one of the key shrimp processors and suppliers in Thailand, and Nan will be delivering that. Nan, you've obviously been involved in the industry for a long time, and how do you think, from your perspective as a processor, as a supplier, how do you think this task force has changed the sector?
It did change the industry. The question you asked, Aaron, how long did it take to change? I would say it changed since day one. It changed our thought, our idea of the understanding of what is IUU, what does that involve, or the understanding of code of conduct of forced labor to Thailand, to the manufacturers, to fishermen, vessels owner. They don't understand what is forced labor in the sense that internationally, the meaning that supposed to be understood internationally. So I would say the change is since day one, because after we've met with Aaron, Lydia, many other NGOs, people from retailers, we share different ideas. And first thing is we understand what is meant by forced labor, IUU, or code of conduct, traceability. All this is a good start. And that's why it takes a long time from us to get there, because it's for Taskforce. What makes it different to me is there are two things. The first thing, this is not NGO or CB or auditor driven or standard driven, it's commercial driven. It's the demand from our customers and the demand to our supplier. So I think that makes it effective. Another thing that I think it makes it change is the capacity building. We don't go out and audit people and say, you fail, so we're not going to do business with you. You pass, so you get to stay. No, that's not the idea. The idea is to understand why they do things the way they do things, and let them understand why it's wrong or not supposed to be, and we help them make the change. So I think that's the two things that kept me with this task force, and I think it's good for the business. It is also good for the country.
That's brilliant. So you're saying it was a dramatic change in perception from day one, a whole load of things,
yes.
Concepts that people hadn't taken into account at all.
Yes.
And in terms of people you're working with, are you working with the farmers? Are you trying to get them on board?
Yes, I worked with farms, with vessel owner. I could tell you the first day I went to the vessel owners, because they didn't understand what I'm supposed to do, and they did not like it at all. They didn't want me to mess with their business, their day-to-day routine, because I was there asking, how do you pay your fishermen? How do you pay your workers? Do you have a time in, check out, how many holidays? It's just somebody who they didn't know before, stepping in the way they do business. So it was difficult at first, but after we sat down and talked, the reason why we're doing this, it got better. And now I can say that a lot of people know what is forced labor, what is trafficking, what kind of activities that's not allowed or can be categorized as human trafficking. I think now we are working on that knowledge, and the next step would be try to make it right.
Brilliant. So you were going there in person and questioning their practices.
Yes. Yes.
I can imagine that must have. I can imagine you were met with a degree of hostility.
Oh, a lot. Especially, yeah, Alyssa is giggling. Especially people in the South, they're honest people, but they're very serious. And they were just saying, I think they're just joking. They said, if I'm not from their one of their customer, I could get shot by messing around with their business. I know they're probably joking, but I was scared at that time. Yeah, but now we're good friends.
Well, that's lucky. Yeah, no, it must be. It sounds like you're really putting yourself on the line there. So I'm glad it quite a brave thing to do.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm alive. it was a good experience for both of us. I didn't know much about their business, but I've learned a lot from them. Yeah.
And just quickly, how about the farmers? The reaction from the farmers, was that as severe as it was from the vessel owners, or were the farmers more relaxed about it?
Farmers is not as severe as vessel owner, because there are different kind of issues with the farmers. For example, for vessel owner, it's more difficult for the vessel owner to find workers, but for farmers it's different. And the work environment for farms is much more, things are more convenient. Life is much easier than vessel owners, so it's different issues.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you, Nan. Thank you very much. Alyssa, you're up next. It's very good to have you and Nan in the same room. You know, you're competitors, but you seem to be, well, you're not actually in the same room, but you seem to be getting on fine. So something is working. And yeah, I think you were going to tell us why do you think the initiative has been so successful?
Yeah, I think the key success factor for us so far in the Seafood Task Force is the word collaboration. That is the very important word, because in my life, this is the first time that I have seen competitors at different levels sit in the same room, working hand in hand together, and go down to, you know, the vessels, the farm, and the feed mill together and learning step by step. So it's really like the on the website of the Seafood Task Force, it says it's a collaboration of multi stakeholder. Yeah, and I think that is very important for Seafood Task Force. Like we can see competitors, retailer in the same room, working together. We, the processor, in the same room, working together, you know, and because it's a task force, we all have tasks to do. And we really dig deep into each of the area that we are responsible for. And we have to deliver, we have goals to achieve. So I think it's very important on that point. Yeah. And we also have very strong leadership from the retailer side. It's really driving us together to achieve our goal. Yeah. And for each of the steps that we, like when we do the supply chain mapping, everybody has to open up and say and give information of how we source our shrimp, you know, what kind of step we go through. And there are like a lot of players involved, you know, and the more we dig, the more we found a lot of nodes. Yeah, and we have to learn to connect them together. And then when we find some link is missing, you know, because now we're working with two very large supply chain. First is the shrimp supply chain, and the second is a feed supply chain. How are these two connected? They're connected at the farm level, where the farm feed the shrimp. So yeah, so now we can trace. I think Thailand is the only country in the world who can trace from vessels through the feed factory and through the farm and through the supermarket. Yeah, I think that is our success so far.
Fantastic. And what sort of percentage of the Thai shrimp suppliers are involved in the task force? What sort of percentages join the collaborative approach?
Yeah, for the major player of the shrimp producer account for about 80% of the exports of Thailand, and also the feed producer also about 70 to 80%. So I think we get majority covered. Yeah.
That's good. And is that percentage going up, or is that fairly stable?
I would say it's fairly stable right now. Yeah, we have tried to gain more people, but there may be like selling to other markets. You know, now that the composition of the export is changed for the US market and the around the world. So yeah, so maybe they're selling to China, you know, and they don't need.
Okay, so there are still some companies who say that we don't need this, our customer base doesn't need this, so we're not going to buy into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll be working on that. But no, thank you very much. That's good to hear. Good to hear your perspective. Laura, you're representing the customer base to a certain extent because you're on the retail side of things. So yeah, what do you think? What makes it different, the Seafood Taskforce, and what's in it for retail? You know, what are you gaining from putting in the hard yards?
Yeah. So just to start with some perspective, so at Albert Heijn, we're based in the Netherlands and we're not sourcing shrimp from Thailand at all. But for the rest of Ahold Delhaize's brands, or not the rest, but the ones primarily operating out of the US, they are sourcing from Thailand. So this initiative is really important for the Ahold Delhaize company as a whole. And for Albert Heijn, we actually see a lot of we see this as a real big chance for the regions where we are sourcing our shrimp from, and that's, for example, Vietnam. So what is different about the Seafood Taskforce? Well, I think its number one unique selling point is really that it's the methods are different. It's not really the target. I think we all want to go in the same direction in terms of transparency in the supply chain, human rights, social compliance in the supply chain, IU, taking care of IU fishing. But I think what's different is the methods, the subgroup structure, the commercial commitment, the commercial drive that's backing the entire initiative, and its potential to be a real scalable solution due to its oversight model. I think that's what's key here. I think also what's really important part of this is the culture of collaboration. And, it's been named a couple of times already, but these are competitors who are sitting together in a room talking about a really complex topic, a really difficult and touchy topic, but we're doing it. And that's what's really important. And I think, for us as buyers, the work that the Seafood Taskforce has done has given us a lot more faith in the seafood that we're sourcing, due to the work that members like, Alyssa's company and Nan's company are actually operationalizing in their supply chains. And what we also see is that not only are the companies taking this seriously, but an added effect is that the government is taking this seriously. And I think that's what's key.
That's the Thai government that they're buying into.
The Thai government, apologies, yes.
Okay.
So I think that's sort of one really important element. And another thing is that the Seafood Taskforce has a new membership model, which basically brings more accountability with it. So if you become a member of the Seafood Taskforce, you are also held accountable for the actions that you're committed to undertake in your supply chains. For a retailer, that really means focus on transparency in the supply chain, knowing where my product comes from and connecting that back at farm level, back down to the vessel, something that the manufacturers in Thailand can help us do. So what we see is that as more people join and as more people are held accountable for the actions and for the commitments that they make upon joining, the entire initiative becomes more effective, not only in cost and in what we actually have to give to the initiative, but also in terms of what it's actually able to achieve. And it also brings more trust with it between the actors who are taking part, especially the transparency in I'm doing what I've committed to, and that's a really important element within the task force. For Albert Heijn itself, the ambition of the task force to move to new geographies is really interesting. So India, Indonesia, Vietnam, these are really interesting new geographies for us. And I think that's also really important for European sourcing in general. So in terms of being a linking pin with European retailers, that move into these new geographies is going to be a really important step. And I think, as a European retailer, by supporting Seafood Taskforce, you're helping yourself. So as a retailer, you're cleaning up your own supply chain. But you also ensure that there's a level playing field for Thailand, because what you have right now is a situation in which Thailand is taking a lot of steps, but the countries surrounding maybe aren't. And that's creating a playing field that's just not level. So if we can move into a situation where the focus is no longer only on Thailand, but also moving into other geographies, it creates a more level playing field, and ensures that we're able to scale up the impact across the entire region. So I think, all in all, we as a retailer joined the task force because the issue that was uncovered in, 2015, is something that it's too big of an issue for us to allow to happen again. It's too important, and we know, this is a regional issue. So we need to really step in and take steps not only in one geography but in an expansion, and that's why we're supporting this initiative.
Thank you, Laura. And what sort of a response have you had from your customers?
Well,
are they aware of it?
No, they're not aware. Okay. I would say that most customers don't really even understand what it means to have farmed seafood, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, we do carry, we certify our seafood, so we do carry the logo on 100% of the packaging. And then the step that we're working on in the background is to, basically the next step to uncover that transparency in the supply chain and look into solutions for the social compliance. But that's not something that we're communicating yet with our clients, unfortunately, or our customers.
No, I think that's impressive that the retailers are taking the lead and you're taking the initiative, and it's not something that's been, necessarily been forced on you by customer demand. Anyway. Sorry,
I can respond to that. Yes, you're right. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Right, brilliant. Thank you, Laura. Lydia, Laura touched on the fact that the task force is looking to move into different geographies. I think that's something that you've been looking into. And yeah, what are you going to take from what you've learned in Thailand, and how are you going to transport that to India, to Indonesia? How are you going to make it work? Because presumably it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Thanks. And it's great going after my colleagues and associates here have gone, because they've touched on the aspects of the task force, the success factors. And it's going to be different in every country, but I think the key to success is leveraging these lessons. It was a slow, painful growth. As Aaron said, it just started with people at the table together, just talking, and the culture of collaboration came out of a huge amount of work to build trust amongst competitors. There was also a level of mistrust about just dealing with NGOs, and the relationships with the government really hadn't been forged yet. But I would think that the critical success factors will be carrying that forward, and I think that the core group has it now in their DNA, but they'll be picking up new stakeholders, and whatever went right about that will just need to be carried forward as others join, and I suspect it will. The relationship with the government really has been very important, and to be successful in other countries, then it's going to really be different and really challenging in some of the countries that we expand into. We'll be building the kind of relationships that have trust through an understanding, through business case, but turning it into partnership. You really are talking about reforming laws. You're talking about changing, developing what we call an enabling environment, where it's easier for companies themselves to operate, but that there's change that benefit both the companies, the workers, and ultimately the economies. This is a really tough industry, particularly now, to be asking for change. so it's pretty remarkable the amount of change that has happened given the tremendous stresses on these companies, and really got to applaud, Nan and Alyssa and others because they're the ones that are being asked to change. So a business case through a combination of awareness, as Nan said, capability building. It's not just do it, it's how to do it in a way that that's actually doable, and that it won't destroy your business, and a sensitivity to those stresses and those constraints. So as Aaron said, it's a longer journey. It's not a short, you have 6 months to, get rid of all your, any indebted workers or something like that. It's a structural change. It's a change in a way of doing business. It's an appreciation for the fact that we're really talking about root causes, and it's not just straight compliance. It's really looking at all of the nodes in supply chains. The traceability piece, you guys, I think, haven't talked as much about the incredible work in the traceability that was done. I think it's one of the big successes of the task force. Another piece of it, from my perspective, is the involvement of the NGOs. And Aaron said, well, it's not just an NGO party, and finger wagging and that kind of a thing. The NGOs, which actually was a real surprise to me, was there was an embrace. And this is a country that's not known for a vibrant, it's changed, but has not been a vibrant NGO collaborative culture kind of a thing between the companies and the NGOs. And that has really been a marked shift. And we, some of the NGOs have been put in very strongly influencing positions in the working group structure, and which has brought a level of expertise. My colleague Mel Asuncion from Verite Southeast Asia was one of the big leaders in the subgroup that took on the most challenging aspect of the forced labor thing at its root cause, which has been the brokers, the unethical behavior of the brokerage system. And the task force, to its credit,
can you just explain what the brokerage system is? Sorry, Lydia.
Again?
Can you just explain what the brokerage system is?
Sure. Please? Well, the forced labor has really come, if I had to put it in a sentence, or one of the major causes has been that in the fishing industry, most of the workers and the fishers are basically coming in from very poor neighboring countries, and they are ending up getting indebted based on what it takes to get from Myanmar or Lao PDR or Cambodia into work in Thailand, and they end up trafficked onto the fishing vessels. And basically it's the middlemen. And so if you go to a company like Alyssa's or Nan's and says, oh, we'll only use ethical brokers, where are those ethical brokers? That it's just not. So the task force has undertaken the really challenging, I don't want to say, it's not an experiment, but it is not a quick fix, and that is to create certified or accredited or a pool of brokers from whom they can source their labor. It's really tough, and the fact that it's a big group of stakeholders that have endorsed the standard and endorsed the approach to doing this is really something. And it was an openness to learning and an openness to experimentation. And that's something that, as we look at working in other countries, the success will be tapping also this local expertise who have a really keen sense of what's going on on the ground. I mean, I don't think the NGOs would be surprised, and this isn't a shaming thing about the Guardian article. People kind of shouldn't have been, but those issues have been researched. But I wanted to, and I'm not just blowing the horn of NGOs. I'm really crediting with the task force for this embrace of experts. I would say something else, and that is the task force has kept worker voice, which means everything from grievance to worker organizations to freedom of association, pretty close to a front burner with all of these other issues, and has this to enable workers to not just be the ones who get help through all of this, but to be in a position to help formulate and drive solutions for themselves is really going to be critical. Again, it's going to be really tough in some of these other environments. It's been tough in Thailand, but that's been a bit of a drumbeat for the task force. And we have, to Nan's point about the capability building, we just finished a guidebook on creating grievance and socializing a different approach to hearing from workers, which is a somewhat alien concept in Thailand compared to a number of the countries in the world. So I think that this is a really critical success factor. And the last one would be setting KPIs and measuring impact. And this is really a behind the scenes kind of a sausage making sort of thing that's going on at the task force. But there really is a culture in the leadership of the task force to, if you can't measure it, you won't do it. And taking that forward and being really clear about where you're trying to get, not just activities, but literally how are you going to measure and demonstrate that you've done something, is going to be huge for success in its expansion.
Rob, can I pick up a bit on that government thing, because I think there's an important point from an environmental perspective.
Please do, yes, yeah. Thank you, Lydia.
Yeah, sorry, Lydia, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go for it, Aaron.
I wanted to pick up on that, because one of the things that, I mean, you probably, if you put yourself in the shoes of a shrimp farmer in Thailand, what can they do about this vessel problem, right? I mean, basically, their product was tainted because of something that was done in vessels before even they got the feed, right? And so I think one of the key aspects on this was about driving IUU out of the supply chains. And, you know, one of the things that, I mean, it's like I mentioned in the article, there's just stories bundled in stories here. You really don't know all that's going on. And one of the things that I didn't really dive into was this notion of a group called Ocean Mind, who does, and we tried to get him in and squeeze another participant into this webinar, but it was too much. So sorry, Brad. But they've done a really phenomenal job in working with the Thai Department of Fisheries, basically helping them track vessels through satellite, and also running algorithms that determine whether these boats are illegally fishing or fishing over the allotted days or fishing in areas that they shouldn't be fishing in. And then that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect that they're helping with is actually building the cases to prosecute. So they're helping enable the government that through the Department of Fisheries to be able to bring the evidence forth to enforce the law. And that is monumental. And now when you connect that to where Nan was talking about engaging with the vessel owners and looking at compliance with labor standards, and then you connect that, as Alyssa was saying, with the feed, and then that feed gets tracked to Alyssa's or to the farms that Alyssa buys from. Now you've got basically a supply chain tree. And again, I think that's, as Lydia was saying and others are saying, that's amazing, that level of traceability. You know? It truly is amazing. And again, you know, that's another reason why for certain I stay in this.
And I think that's an interesting point you make as well about having governmental involvement. It's not just getting the government to back the scheme, but they're backing it up with the legal process, and they're prosecuting people who are not following protocol.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I mean, I'm an observer in this, but you know, Alyssa and Nana live in it.
Yeah. And so it really does have some serious teeth, this whole initiative. If it's leading to arrests, it's leading to not just changes of practice on paper, but people are actually getting prosecuted for corrupt practices.
Yeah, and and I think the other piece that's really important to note is this isn't a business expansion effort, right? The Seafood Task Force is not about expanding income, right? It's not a business to serve itself. It's a business to serve the members, and the members that want oversight, and the members that want access to trading. This is for them. So it's not like it's not a certification program. It's basically a compliance program owned by the supply chain owners.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to open the floor to, we've got some questions coming in from the audience. So thank you, those of you who put in some questions. Please keep them coming. If you've got them, ask them, now's your chance. And often you get 5 members of the Seafood Task Force on your doorstep. And first one comes from Kateri Siglione, and this directed to you, Laura. Laura mentioned that most customers don't understand what it means to have farmed seafood. How can the STF work change this? Does the group see that as part of its role? So are you promoting an understanding of aquaculture?
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that, actually. I know that from a retail perspective, we're definitely promoting aquaculture as also a way to take pressure off marine stocks, etc. So we do position it in the same way as marine caught seafood in the stores, package it the same way, make sure that the certification logo is present, included in all kinds of delicious recipes and things to make people buy it. But I'm not sure if the Seafood Task Force actually has a customer-facing communications, let's say, because I think most of the work that's being done is really in the background, and not on a sort of customer-facing point. But maybe one of the others can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think it's about being surgical for the solutions to the problems that were stated by the members.
Okay, yeah, I think that's Laura, there's another one here. It's not entirely related to the Seafood Task Force, but is related to the sourcing of seafood. And has Albert Heijn considered sourcing Vigney from European recirculation systems? And why not?
I don't know the answer to that. Sorry, I'm not the sourcing manager.
That's quite all right.
Apologies for that, but we have had conversations with local producers. So I'll just say that much.
Okay, thank you. More generally, we're talking about the task force moving into new geographies. Can anyone give an idea about which of these countries, Vietnam, India, Indonesia, which one's going to be prioritized? Or is that a state secret?
No, we have already started some works in Vietnam, so that's our next stop. We met with the Vietnamese the processor associations. We talked to them about Seafood Task Force, and they're interested in learning how to do traceability, and they also have problem with IUU. They have a yellow card, so they would want to work with Seafood Task Force to get out of that yellow card too.
That's a yellow card from the European Union, or?
Yeah.
So they see it as a way to get back into European markets with their shrimp produce.
Right.
And what's the sort of timescale on that in terms of actually setting something up there in Vietnam?
We don't have a timescale yet. We just did a baseline learning, trying to understand what is their issues, because each country has different issues. So we know that they are interested in traceability and they want to get rid of the yellow card, but we haven't gone deeper than that. What we are working on now is to get retailers the same way that we started with Thailand. Is we have retailers start the being a supply chain owner and start mapping. That's what we are doing in Vietnam now, trying to get retailers to start doing the mapping so we can identify who are the supply chain owners.
Okay, thank you. We've got another. Sorry, go ahead.
We as Albert Heijn, we've actually started the process already of trying to get some more traceability into our supply chain back to Vietnam. So we're actually proactively trying to operationalize this already, and it's tough, but we're taking steps.
Okay.
I mean, the number of actors in the supply chain multiply the Thai situation by
insane.
10,000. I mean, there must be something like 200,000 farmers versus
You mean
in Vietnam.
In Thailand?
No, in Vietnam.
Oh, in Vietnam.
Versus what, maybe 7,000 or so in Thailand, 8,000 or so. So it's monumentally different from sheer volume perspective. But again, you know what? For me, look at it. If the Seafood Task Force, if this group can't do this, you know, you give up hope. You know, I mean, this is like the best chance. This is the best chance to do something, yeah, and to really put in lasting change. And every one of these folks here will say the job's not done, right? It's not done, you know, and they're not parading around celebrating, you know, but that's because it's so hard.
No, I think that's it. I'm glad that you think that, not that it's hard, but that the job's not done. And it does sound like you've got your work cut out. We've got time for a couple more quick questions from the audience. One from Rebecca Jenkins, who commends you all for the great work you've done on human rights in such a relatively short period. But she's wondering if animal welfare concerns may ever become an additional focus of the task force.
I can respond to that. Animal welfare concerns are becoming a concern of the certification standards themselves. So in that way, it's also built into the system, and maybe doesn't necessarily need to be built into the Seafood Task Force work.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. I'll keep going quickly just because there's a couple more coming in. We got another one from Kateri Ciglione. How's technology played a role in identifying issues and sharing knowledge amongst partners? Is there interoperability amongst data platforms for companies that make up the task force?
Maybe I can field that one, and I guess I'd say that it's been an interesting process. The WWF kind of dug in really with the task force on traceability, and we knew, I mean, the suppliers were having rooms dedicated to boxes of paper being transferred from vessels, ports, and fish meal factories, and feed mills, and farms, and traders. And, yeah, so it's just, and so, you know, WWF thought with a very generous support from the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, gave a grant to help develop an electronic traceability system, you know, for the task force. And this wasn't meant to be, you know, super blockchain and all this kind of stuff. You know, this is meant to help connect the dots. And I think that the interesting twist to this was that as we got closer to operationalizing this traceability system, you know, there was a lot more work with the government, and the government has picked up and developed its own traceability system, which, you know, from our perspective is a great thing, because it means that this is more sustainable than an NGO grant, right? So this is actually becoming systemic. And so I think that it's a big nod to the Thai government for, you know, for listening and hearing, you know, what the supply chain actors need, you know, and so it's a really good thing. And you know, there's already talk about this kind of stuff in Vietnam and India.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aaron. And that actually answers the next question, which is from Blake Harris. Blake, I hope that answers your questions on traceability and the traceability system. We're running very short of time now. So I'd just like to give everyone a chance just in a minute to say, you know, the Seafood Taskforce has been going for 6 years. Where would you like it to see it, or what would you like to see it achieve in 6 years more? Lydia, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Oh, thanks. I think I would just pick up on Aaron's point. There is no end point. There is no job well done in sustainability. It's really, it's a continual improvement and a continual efforts not to backslide as a result of economic pressures, which are unavoidable, political pressures, which are unavoidable. I would want to see us continuing the march, and to Laura's point as well, is leveling the playing field will be really critical for any country that has stepped up and started to work, because they have to not shoulder the burden and the costs of these improvements and then have other companies just based simply on unit price to go source elsewhere. And that's a you know, an ongoing issue globally across a lot of different commodities. And so I would love to see in 6 years that Taiwan is on board. It's a kind of a target, a hotspot, ground zero for a lot of these issues. And then really start, there's no reason that aspects of the model that are successful can't be replicated in some form, you know, in Africa and Latin America. So what Laura is doing, which is basically taking the lessons and technology from and starting the traceability, that company on its own in Vietnam, would be great to see in 6 years that has sort of spreading out like tentacles from the incubator of the task force work in Thailand.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you very much. Laura, I see you have to go in 2 minutes, so you're up next.
Yeah, well, I just want to basically say what Lydia just said. For us, it's important that the geographic expansion occurs so that more companies can also benefit from the great work that's happening for their supply chains. So I'll just leave it at that. And then I need to leave. I'm really sorry, guys.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Nan, would you like to go next?
Sure. In 6 years, I would like to see more retailers. Next year, actually, or the sooner the better, more retailers get involved, because you guys, if you are retailers out there, you are the supply chain owner, you are the driver, and I think you have the commercial power to make this change.
Thank you very much.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Nan. Alyssa?
Yeah. For me, I would just say that for other people have been saying the country expansion. For me, maybe in the 6 year time, we in Thailand, we also have more work to progress. You know, we do it step by step. Like, for example, now we have mastered the processor work, the traceability and the responsible recruitment on the processor side. And then we can, next step, we can go to the farm side, you know, and so on and so forth down our supply chain. So I think that is also some work needs to be done, because the task force is very task focused, and we do it step by step. We make sure that this step has already, we already master it and it's okay. And then we go on to the next, step. Yeah. One thing that I learned from being in the seafood task force from our leader is that we don't let perfection get in the way of progress. So we are always doing progress, you know, we don't, even though the challenge is so huge, we do it step by step. Yeah.
Thank you, Alyssa. Very nice note to end on. And Aaron, you started this thing.
Scapegoat. So for me, in 6 years, I want to see the operational dashboard of Thailand that says, this is the compliance level. I want to see an environmental piece be laid on top of that. That's just simple. That's about the natural resources, the pieces that got Thailand into trouble by depletion, right? We want to see that dashboard of the results, right? It doesn't have to be per company, be aggregated. The other thing is that I want to echo Nan's response, because if you're not at the table, you're not helping, really. And the retailers have a large burden on this. And we're talking about forced labor in supply chains, right? In 2020. And if somebody doesn't want to spend the money for a ticket to Thailand to see where their product is coming from and try to address these changes and understand things, I mean, that's just turning a blind eye, turning a blind eye. So I do want to see, I mean, people have done the hard work, the really hard work initially, right? And so there is momentum, and the pace of acceleration keeps increasing. So it's keep it together, and it's gonna be good stuff,
Fantastic. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you all. I think if anyone was skeptical about what the Seafood Task Force has achieved, and then I think anyone who watches this webinar or tunes in afterwards on YouTube should hopefully be convinced otherwise, because it's clearly a very committed, very diverse, and equally committed bunch of people. They've got farmers on board, they've got fishermen on board, they've got feed processors on board, they've got governments on board. And let's hope that they can do that, replicate that success, and continue that success in other geographies in the coming years. So I'd like to thank you all and congratulate you all for all the good work you've done. And thank everyone who's tuned into this and who will tune into this in the non-live version in the coming weeks. Thank you all very much. That's all from us.
Thanks, Fish
Thank you.